Hey, good morning, Last in Line Nation. You're excited as I am, I hope, because we are starting a new month in November, and we got a brand new guest as we do each episode. And I just want everyone to know that this is a privilege and an honor to come to you today with a guy who has a great perspective on this topic. He's going to probably share some things of his experiences and his insight that you may have never thought about before. But we're going to title this session for November, Kingdom Business. And this is a hot topic. This has been a topic in my heart for years. And I'm glad we're getting to get to know some other perspective on it, because as Christians, when we go out into the world, go out into the workplace, our communities, we're not always met with open arms. And we always, we have to constantly battle our faith, how we represent our faith, how we lead with those principles, and how some of the things that are out there are obstacles and challenges of how we do that. So this is going to be an awesome, awesome series. I have today Jesse Cruz, who is from upstate New York. He's got a family, he's got a wife. He is an Iraq war veteran from the Army, and we'd like to all reach out and thank you personally for your service, for helping provide this platform, because without you we wouldn't be able to do this. He is a program coordinator of the Wayne County Youth Advocate Program. So he speaks at correctional facilities. He coaches sports. So I just want to, he's pursuing his master's in theology, and I hope I get this right, at Colgate Rochester Crozer Divinity School. So because I won't be able to do near the justice for Jesse's story and background, I'm going to let him talk a little bit about a project he did last year and a little bit about his background. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here on this nice, crisp morning.
Mm-hmm. Good deal, man. So talk about your background just a little bit, a little more in depth than what I did. I just set the stage for you, and then about your project last year.
Absolutely. So last year I was working on a project. It actually taken me quite a few years. So back in 2017, to kind of rewind what brought me to the point where I'm at today is I had a daughter who was born premature. Mm-hmm. And so, my wife and I, we had been praying for a while to have a child together. And, God answered that prayer with a little girl who was born. She was born in January of 2017. And but she wasn't projected to be born until May of 2017. So mm-hmm. She came out extremely premature. Yeah. And, we were basically living in the hospital every day, and watching her fight every single day of her life, was very tough and the hardest season of my entire life. And then after she fought for 42 days, she passed away. And from that, what I said, I'm heartbroken, and I always will be. There's always going to be a part of me. I'm going to miss her, but I also know that I'm going to see her again. Yeah. And, I think anytime someone goes through a traumatic event, there's questions they ask, why me, why me? Mm-hmm. But I had to get to a point of where, how can I use this to honor God? How can I use this to reach people all over the world? And the answer came into writing and speaking. And so I started writing every single day. About a month after she passed away, I took pen to paper. I wrote in a notebook every single day until I filled it completely up. And then I typed it up and edited it. And then I got a publisher. And then I came up with a book called Live Your Dash. Mm-hmm. Discovering the 8 F's to freedom. And the dash is representing the dash that you see on a tombstone. Right. The time they're born to the time they pass away. That dash in the middle is representing the quality and the purpose of their life, what they've done with the time that they've been given. And some people live 100 years, and some, like my daughter, may live only 42 days. But no matter how short or long that dash is what you do with the time in between. And her 42 days have impacted people all over the world. People that never met her. She's a little 1-pound girl that, no one's really ever met, is still preaching the word of God to people all over the world.
That's amazing. I mean, that is, I didn't know that part of your story, and man, what a testimony, and what a I mean, some people live their whole lives hoping to have that kind of impact that she had in a short time. And so, man, that's great that you use your story. That's just that we could talk hours on that and how to use your story to the best way you can. But, someone's always watching, right? Someone's always, there's always somebody that can probably benefit from something we've gone through. And, the Bible talks about how God uses all things for good. So, you're obviously doing that. You had a choice to make, right? In that moment, you had a choice of where that was going to take you and what your story was going to look like for people. And you definitely chose to honor God and honor her and help other people all in the same thing, all in the same time. And what a blessing that must be and how good that must feel. So, man, thanks for sharing that. We're going to talk about our faith and how we influence with that around folks that aren't always in that same space mentally, spiritually as we are. So, when we talk about kingdom business, I came up with, setting the tone for that. And tone, the TONE part I have as different sections. So we're going to hit each one of these and kind of get your perspective on how you operate on a daily basis, because I know listeners out there get up every day with that challenge of, am I going to be able to do it today? Am I going to be able to represent the gospel and represent Christ like I want to in the environment that I have to be in? So we're going to talk about that. And the first letter of tone would be T, and the tempo. So I know this may seem a little confusing at face value as to why I would put tempo in there. Well, as we go and walk this out, what I want to ask you in your experience, and you can take any area of leadership that you've had, that you're currently in, your job, at school, whatever, and you can just use your experiences, but our tempo of how we walk this out. So I want to ask you, what is a rhythm that you've established on any team you've been on? We're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about team and leadership. So have you, and how have you established that kind of that rhythm of how you walk every day and what people see? What do they come to expect when they see you walk through the door?
Right. So for me, the tempo when you're around people doesn't actually start in that moment. It actually starts the moment you wake up. So for me, my tempo doesn't start when I walk into the office or I walk into the school. That tempo has been developed hours prior.
Yeah.
And that tempo is developed first thing in the morning. When I get up, I read, I write, I pray. And so that rhythm is what gets me through the day. That rhythm and that tempo is what helps me be able to communicate and interact with other believers and non-believers, and to reflect the love of God. So I got to prepare my heart first in solitude with me and God every single morning. And once I'm able to do that, not to say that the day is going to be perfect, but I'm much more equipped to handle any challenges and interacting with people at a deeper level because my heart's in the right place. There's moments where I've rushed out the door and I've skipped over reading and praying, and I can tell, and I believe that people around me can tell, because I'm more anxious, I'm more rushed, I'm more maybe selfish, So I've realized that tempo and the rhythm with God in the morning before I even leave my house is what sets the rhythm for the entire day.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you have to be, and I hadn't thought about it that way. You have to do it, you have to be intentional prior to those moments where you are going to show what that looks like. It can't just, happen when you walk through those doors. So it's got to be a foundation that you set every morning. And I totally agree, because I do the same thing, and I haven't always done that. And when I haven't done that, there's been just this unrest about me. And like you say, people can tell the difference whenever you do it right and whenever you don't do it. And I think there's a cadence that we establish as leaders. I think when we're leading in that capacity and we set that foundation early in the morning, we get there and we've already kind of prepared our hearts for that. I think there's a cadence that we operate on every day that our team notices. So if we're leading a team, and talk about some of your leadership roles that you've had, and talk about some of those ethical marching orders that you've established, because not every day out there do we see that from leaders, right? We don't necessarily see that ethics or that I don't know, that core values, those aren't always out there in leadership that we view today, right? And I'm talking about all areas of leadership, not Christian leadership, not secular, but any leadership we see right now, we kind of have been seeing a little bit of a negative turn. So talk about teams that you've led and some of those ethical marching orders, I call it, that you've established in your team culture.
So, working with youth, in group settings and things like that, I think a huge culture is transparency. I don't want to come into any setting as in I have it all figured out. I have all the answers. Everyone listen to everything that I say, because the bottom line is that I have problems and challenges and hurdles I got to jump to like anybody else. And I don't ever want to make people think that I don't. So for me, transparency is huge. Like I put it all out there with, the worst day of my entire life, or how we started this conversation. I have some challenges. I'm still working through that.
Yeah.
And 10, 20, 30 years from now, I probably still will be working through it. By the grace of God, it'll hopefully get better. But I think in a team culture, when you have someone who's leading or in charge, when that person shows that they're human, then everybody else has permission to make a mistake.
Right. That's good. That's big. I think that's right on too. Like, can you think of any examples where, I would assume that the people that you lead or have led know your story, obviously, because you've been transparent enough to share that. And so the level of authenticity that you bring to the table as a leader, I think, is crucial. And those people see that, so they want to follow somebody that they know isn't perfect, like you said. And I think that's the mistake and I even mentioned that, I think, in my book, about leaders that have this false sense of needing to be perfect, because they feel like the people won't follow if they make a mistake, and they're not willing to be that vulnerable. So I know for a fact leadership doesn't say anywhere in the leadership handbook that we can't be vulnerable, we can't be transparent, and we're not fallible. So like you said, the grace of God kind of washes over some of our mistakes, and we can just walk through that. But can you give an example of maybe where you did that, really well, or maybe you saw that it had an impact, the fact that you were able to be kind of out there for your team?
Yeah, so I can attest. I can actually use a reference from I think it was years ago. I was coaching a sports team, and I just kind of shared openly about myself personally being cut from a basketball team, and the impact that had on me, and how that I made a mistake in a game. I've made plenty of mistakes in playing sports in my life, and I can remember a time years ago where one of the kids actually brought all the players on the team together. He kind of almost called a team meeting with all of us after one of the games, and he was the leader of the team on the court out there, and he kind of just broke down and cried and told his team, "I'm sorry, I messed up, I made a mistake," and I think that was huge, because if it hadn't been modeled to him prior that it's okay to make mistakes, I don't know if he would have took that kind of accountability. And once all the other players saw their leader crying and telling him, that he was sorry, other ones started going down the line, well, it wasn't just your fault. This is what I did wrong. And they kind of just shared what they did wrong. So it was a powerful moment.
That's good, man. That's really good. So tell me about just briefly, kind of your role in the military.
So I was so I was in the U.S. Army. I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, and we went to Iraq, and I think it was 2008 to 2009. I was there for about a year, and so I was in charge of the generators, making sure that they were up and running. They ran like security cameras and things like that. Sometimes I had to check vehicles for bombs and things like that. So when they would come through the gates, I was the one checking to see if anyone is bringing any illegal explosives in or anything like that. So every single day I'm checking the vehicle. I'm like, this could be my last day on Earth, literally, because I don't know if this vehicle has put something underneath it, and by the time I find it, it's too late.
Right.
So that's kind of basically what I did. And then I supported some of my, I was with other soldiers and stuff like that, making sure the vehicles were up and running. So making sure that they can run out on mission and prepared for the day's work.
Yeah. So did you take anything from the leadership you had in the military? Did you take any one or two good things that you tried to implement? I know there's wide range of leadership styles probably in the military, but I know that there's some good leaders out there. So did you grab any of that out there and try to implement some of that?
I would say the one principle was the importance of being on time, because they put that into our minds from day one. The consistency of being able to be prepared, be on time. So I mean, obviously there's times in my life where I'm still late, but it's rare. So most of the time I'm ahead of schedule, and I've realized when I'm 5-10 minutes early that I have time to decompress. I have time to think. I have time to gather myself. Whereas when I'm running in 5-10 minutes behind schedule in any setting, I feel like I can't be as present in that setting because I'm so rushed. I'm only thinking about how am I going to get there on time? How am I going to beat this traffic? Or if I'm there, one of the first people there, or I have more relaxed. I just feel better. So I think being on time has been huge for me in the military. Definitely taught me that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I appreciate you talking about that, because some of the little things in leadership kind of determine what else people choose to follow about us. I mean, if we have some of the basics right, like being on time, leading by example, not just talking the talk, but walking it. And I mean, I think that totally impacts whether or not folks follow us and how, to the degree they follow us. So something as little as punctuality, I think, is huge, because they're watching, right? Our team's watching what we do. They're looking for, especially as Christians, people are looking for any little point of imperfection or fallibility that we have. So I think you hit tempo pretty good and set a good stage for us. The O in the tone is obstacles. So, what would you say that the biggest obstacle is that leaders face, or that you face from a faith-based standpoint, walking into a secular environment every day? What's that biggest obstacle that you feel is hardest for leaders?
I think it's limited thinking. So although people of leadership know that they're held to a higher standard, it's this constant worry and fear of, what if I get it wrong? What if they don't believe me? What if they don't trust me? What if I can't lead properly? So it's like this limited thinking. Even when you've reached the peak of any career success, it's like there's still like a part of you that's like, can I keep this going? Can I maintain this? So it's like, I feel like, when you get into leadership role, God is advancing you, and he's using you to advance the kingdom. And so we shouldn't be in our limited. I think a lot of times we relapse into the old person, who we were before we met Christ, with all the doubts and all the fear and all the worry. That's what the devil uses to try to get us off track from our mission and our purpose in life.
Right.
And so constantly for me, it's like I have this battle of, I'm currently trying to train myself to not think like how I used to think. I have to literally rewire my brain with my new thinking. Once you start thinking a certain way, it develops these pathways into your brain that becomes habitual. And once you develop these positive habits, these negative habits can die by the wayside. But it takes consistency every day. It's changing your whole mindset on how you think about things, and not have this limited thinking, because I think the enemy wants us to think that we're so limited and we don't have a great, powerful God that can get us through any circumstance. So it's learning to trust God more, and to get out of our own way.
That's beautiful, because I mean, that was actually the title of last month's series, was Get Out of Your Way. And so, yeah, we can sort of be the one that prohibits any kind of progress or influence in our own life, because of believing whatever lies we choose to believe. And so I was going to, get to a place where, you talk about just some of the obstacles and that fear being out there, which is 100% true. As leaders and I keep saying secular environment, but because a lot of us in faith-based, in my experience, it was a total secular environment, and I was just now learning how to walk this out. And that was a struggle, because I got into a trap of kind of feeling like I was leading two different lives, right? I would basically walk into that environment and try to conform to that way, basically just because so my people would follow and like me and accept me. And I was new to the area anyway, so I was an outsider. So, and then I would Sundays and, during that night, I would go back home and I would try to be this faith-based Christian and try to do that right. So I had this kind of terror between two worlds. And when you mentioned something about, renewal, and I think about what the Bible says about not conforming to the way of the world, but be transformed by renewing our mind, right? And if I would have done a better job at that every day of renewing my mind, I think it would have been a easier transition for me to go into that environment every day. So how do we defend against some of that? And you kind of spoke a little bit to it, but maybe expand on defending against ways that, the enemy tries to poke holes in kind of our spirituality, our leadership, because he's going to do it, right? He's going to try to poke holes in it. So you talk about laying the foundation every morning, right? But how do we throughout the day kind of guard against falling back into that and being a victim of our environment?
So I've actually just learned this recently. I mean, and I've always heard it and talked about it, but now that I'm able to apply it at a deeper level, is in any given situation, if I'm stressed or I'm frustrated or I'm anxious, it almost always leads to a lack of gratitude. So there's something or someone I'm not thankful for, and God has given me more than I'll ever need. He's given me so much. And when you take the time to actually identify all the people that you're thankful for, all the things that you're thankful for, all the experiences and situations in your life that you're thankful for, that literally puts the devil way behind you. He can't get anywhere near. The devil can't get near a thankful heart. He just can't. Because when you're expressing gratitude, you're getting closer to God. Because God wants us to give thanks. And we give thanks to God, and we give thanks for our family and any other great thing he's put into our life. I've noticed when I am being thankful, I am so much closer to God. And when I'm feeling discouraged, that gratefulness pulls me immediately out of it.
Wow. And that's something you can implement throughout the day, right? So when you feel like the tension or the heat's getting high, is that something you go to immediately? Like you're training your body to kind of, as a reflex, go there, right?
Yeah, because our brains are actually designed to point out everything that's wrong, what we're missing, what we don't have, how things are unfair. And it comes natural for our brains to do that. There really is no effort. It just automatically does it. So you literally have to retrain your brain to be thankful. And once you start to train your brain through repetition, daily gratitude times, I do it 4 times a day, at least minimum. I have a list that I made. I wrote it out, and then I read it after breakfast, lunch, dinner, before bed. And since I've been doing that, my whole perspective has changed. And in those moments in between, I just have these conversations with God and just keep thanking him, throughout the day, because anyone can do this. It doesn't take any special skill or education or talent to say thank you. And it's expressing that gratitude, especially to the people that you love and you care about, also is life-giving.
Absolutely. I mean, that's gold right there. And that's something tangible and practical people can hold on to and actually do it without giving it a whole lot of thought. It doesn't require a whole lot of education or training, right? Because honestly, if we're created in the image of God, we're created and wired to do that if we tap into it. Like, it's in there. But like you said, in our day, we're naturally conditioned to go the other direction. And so we have to really be forcing ourselves to look at what's good. And I tell my kids all the time, look, that could have been a whole lot worse, or there's somebody else that's got it way worse. So when we start looking deep in ourselves and feeling sorry for it and really being kind of selfish in our thinking, that takes us completely the other direction from gratitude. And we could talk for hours on gratitude and how it steers and directs us every day. But no, that's good, because the obstacles you're talking about could really be combated with just that ability to feel grateful. And I even think humility is one of those other things in there that helps us stay grounded. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and I'd say to go off of that real quick, because you reminded me of something. Is like, in the Bible, when Jesus is going to feed the thousands of people, his disciples they're anxious, they're stressed, they're worried. We only have 5 pieces of bread and 2 fish. We don't have enough. They're stressed, they're anxious, they're worried.
Yeah.
And Jesus, before he gives out the food, what does he do? He gives thanks. And when you give thanks, everything always multiplies. And when you give thanks, hungry people get fed. People get fed in their spirit, they get fed physically. So if you go around and you give thanks, everyone around you is going to feel that impact. And all those people got fed because Jesus gave thanks. And gratitude is literally life-changing. Like I said, it multiplies to the masses and everyone around you.
Wow. That's a tremendous analogy, and that's something I hope the listeners got that. That's really something that we can grab onto and use. Man, because it's contagious, right? Because, literally we will stand out in any environment if we maintain gratitude because it's different, right? Like the world around us isn't always like that. So to stay abnormal, which I would encourage in society today, abnormal's okay. Because, when we look around us, we're always trying to fit in. But I think as Christians, we need to be standing out and we need to be making a difference. And to do that, you got to be different, right? And so what you're talking about is probably counterintuitive to the environment we're in, because if a negative situation happens in business, in our workplace, in the areas we lead, in the youth, whatever, like when something negative happens, everybody piles onto that, right? Everybody in the room knows how to get negative and everybody feeds off each other. So as Christians, we can stand out by just pointing out good in things, pointing out our gratitude, living our gratitude. That's the way we can be different. And that's a simple, small thing that people will follow. And we're talking about leadership. So I don't know. I think that's a great way for our listeners to really implement something like that in our daily lives. What are some non-negotiables? So we go to the next point. We've covered tempo, we've covered obstacles. Now we're talking the N in tone, which I label as non-negotiables. So things that are just kind of in us that don't waver. What are the values that are the hardest, would you say, to implement and to keep steady in the environments we get in the business world, in whatever area of influence we have, whatever sphere of influence? What's the hardest thing that you find is hard to kind of keep that in the center?
I think that, and I know this, but in certain settings I can neglect to do this, is that any person I interact with at the grocery store, at the gas station, anywhere I breathe air, is that I am an evangelist for Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to go preach a sermon. I don't have to recite a scripture. But the way that I conduct myself is a moment to show them Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to be in a church to do that, because the church is not, that's people, it's a building, you know what I mean?
Right.
But it's really the people. That's the church, is getting out and in your community, everywhere that you go. So for me, it's remembering in all situations that I could be the only Bible this person ever reads. I could be the only example of Christ that they've ever known. And through my own selfish desires, I want to make sure I get to the next place where I'm going, and I'm thinking about me. I'm thinking about the next task. So at times I can become so task oriented, I forget about the people at the register, at the gas station, at the restaurant. And I got to remember that no task is too small for God, and no person is less important for God. They all matter and they're all important. And I need to treat them as such, not to say that I'm going around disrespecting anybody, but at the same time, I'm so caught up in Jesse's world that I can forget about, man, God has called you and ordained you to be at this gas station with this clerk right now. Yeah. What are you going to do with it? Is it just going to be the same as every other person that walks through the line? So I got to remember that, there's an opportunity to share the love of God anywhere I go.
That's absolutely, couldn't have said it better myself. I've heard people say, preach the gospel without even saying a word, which means live it. And that's what you're talking about, is just kind of the way you carry yourself without even preaching it. And I love what you said about the church, because I love church. I mean, church is amazing. It's necessary. It's biblical. But there's a difference in doing church and being church, right? And so you're talking about going out and being the church, and the people are what make that happen. And I totally agree. So you talk about, so what I heard you say is the hardest way to implement that is sometimes being self-absorbed and maybe letting that moment pass you by, because you're not focused on that moment. You're focused on something more internal. So in addition to that, what would you say is a common mistake that people make, Christian leaders make, when they, I guess, compromise some of their values to put influence and their leadership above kind of what that value system is? What do you think is one of the main areas we miss it as Christian leaders?
I would say building relationships with people who aren't Christians. I mean, to me, that's, if everyone in your entire circle all believes exactly the same way that you do, you're not leading anybody to heaven. You're not. You've brought no one to the kingdom at all, because they already believe what you believe. And
Right.
as Christian leaders, in my experience, and there's nothing wrong with obviously having a community of other believers. I mean, that's what the Bible says to do. But when you have zero people that you communicate with on a regular basis who don't believe, that's a problem. That's a big problem.
That's
you
right.
know what I mean? That's huge. And to me, I've had to be intentional about keeping and forming relationships with people who don't believe what I believe, because that's the way the kingdom's going to get grown, not with people who already believe what I believe. Yeah, we can go do work. We can learn from each other. But let's bring some people to God. Let's just bring people to God. And when we're already with God, we got to bring more. Each one reach one. That's what we got to do.
That's it. I mean, that's pretty laid out, pretty clear, right? In the Great Commission, right? It's to talk about go to make disciples of all nations. And so I totally, and I miss the boat on that too sometimes. I think it's, why? I mean, I think we're creatures of comfort. We're creatures of habit. And sometimes it's an uncomfortable conversation when we're seeking out people that don't see what we see or believe what we believe. And so we gravitate toward what's comfortable. That's my error. That's my mistake. So I think it's seeking out those folks. And you can tell, it doesn't always have to be a conversation at the Starbucks line of, hey, do you believe in God? Why not? It's not one of those things. It's just sharing, like you talked about, living the gospel without really beating people over the head with it. And people get curious. At least I've found that, and you probably do too. You young people, you're leading young people, you're influencing the next generation. I'm sure that they are inquisitive. Kids want to know, young people want to know, hey, why are you so grateful all the time? Why are you so positive all the time? People will ask, why do you look like nothing ever bothers you? So, and I guess that will lead me off script. Every episode I do this, I send you guys sort of an idea of where it's going, but I also go off script on a few things. So I'm going to throw one at you. Like, what's the one thing you think that the people that you're leading, that youth program, those kids, what's the one thing they would say maybe about you that they notice is a consistent, constant thing about Jesse Cruz?
I would say that is trust. They understand that I'm a flawed human being. I don't come at them as, all-knowing and all-powerful adults who's going to tell you how to live your life. It's more of I come down to their level. I trust them enough, and they trust me enough. So trust it's a mutual thing. You know what I mean? We have built a relationship of where I'm going to show up every single time, and I'm going to be here for you. And to me, trust is like the foundation of any healthy relationship. And so it's continuously showing up for them. And I hope they would say that I'm a trustworthy individual, that they know if they have a hard time, they're having a challenge, they're having a problem, that they can share it with me. and I'm not going to go share it with the world. You know what I mean? I'm going to keep that between us, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help them be successful and overcome the adversity. So to me, trust is where it starts.
That's tremendous. Yeah. And I don't even know if I expected you to say that. I think that's a great answer because we take that for granted, and kids are very intuitive, man. And I don't know what ages are you typically mostly around over there? All
So
ages or?
it's rain. Yeah, I mean, typically it's from about ages 8 to 14.
Yeah. So even at 8, kids are very curious and they pick up on inconsistencies, right? They get it. Like you can't fool 8-year-olds sometimes. And so I think it's cool that you're consistent and that they can trust you, because that opens all kinds of doors for influencing their life and them actually wanting to emulate some of your ways of just interacting. Like when they trust you, they're like, I can follow this guy. I can do what he does. Let's do what Jesse does. Let's say what Jesse says, So I think that's a crucial, and we take for granted as adults in leadership that that's important. Trust is a huge thing in teamwork environment, in a culture you're creating as a leader. So, you can't just talk about it though. Like it's got to be one of those things. They see you in those moments of, okay, this could be where he snaps. This could be where he cracks right here. Let's see what he does. And so to maintain that consistency from a faith standpoint, from who you are in Christ and what you're trying to lead people to, and the example you're setting, it's got to be consistent. And they trust that. So trust is a huge word. I'm glad you said that. So, that kind of next thing that we're going to go into is the E of tone. So we're setting the tone, right? In kingdom business, it's how we operate in our workplace, in our communities, in our environments that aren't aligned with us spiritually completely all the time. How are we carrying that? How are we representing our faith? The last one's the E, the evaluation portion. So I want to kind of look at Jesse Cruz and his influence to this point, and how do you evaluate, or can you even quantify the influence you're having? How do you know what good looks like?
That's a great question. I probably, my wife would probably say I do this too much, overthinking, trying to, I may come home and kind of beat myself up. There was a moment that today I missed the opportunity. I could have said this differently. I could have done this differently. I wasn't very Christ-like today. I lost my temper. I was probably a poor example of what a Christian is actually supposed to look like. I mess up all the time. It's a daily battle I have to go through, and I'm not always going to get it right. A lot of times it's going to be wrong and not Christ-like. And, I learned from those experiences, and I try to do better the next time and understand that I'm going to mess up, and God's going to be there to pick up the mess once I'm able to give it to him. And thinking that, I'm going to be able to do this in Jesse's power. I'm going to be able to be a godly example with my own skills, talents, habits, and abilities. That's not going to be the case. It's going to be the grace of God that gets me through. And so when I'm able to evaluate and see the impact that I'm making is the conversations that come from my interactions with people. These conversations, guided towards faith? Are these conversations guided towards advancing the kingdom? And even for, I talk with people on a regular basis who don't believe what I believe. And they're very clear that they don't believe what I believe. And we're still friends. And I think it's important that although maybe they're not converting and turning their lives over to Christ, I think our objectives as Christians is that if, people aren't going to turn their lives over, let's not be the reason why they don't.
Wow.
I don't want to be the reason why someone doesn't. And if they do, that's all credit to God. But I don't want to be the one to say, hey, they didn't do it because of my poor example of Christianity. So I have to learn to be more careful with the things that I say and that I do. In times that I've messed up, I need to own it and apologize and say, you know what, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. And I want to be able to take, through my books, that my second book and my first one, and the speaking that I do is like, my goal is to get people to take one step towards Christ. That's it. If you could take one step towards Christ, That means that you're open to the opportunity of hearing what he has to say. You're open to the idea of him taking residency in your heart. So it all starts with one step of faith, just a baby step. That's my objective, is if I can get people to take one step, whether that's just listening to a song or a sermon or just having a conversation with me about faith, they've taken a step. They may haven't committed yet, but now the seed has been planted, and God will water it over time through the right people. And when the time is right, there will be a harvest.
Absolutely. I hope people got as much out of that right there, that statement, as I did. Because I will tell you, as a Christian leader, I can almost over elevate my expectation of my impact, if that makes sense. So I can think, man, if I don't get 10 people this month to acknowledge faith in Christ and then commit their life, or if I don't get 10 guys to attend this Bible study this week, I failed. So I think we, like you said, overthink and kind of create these expectations of our role a little bit. We elevate those a little. So then when we fall short, we get discouraged. Some of us as Christian leaders maybe have stepped away from that because we get frustrated because we're not hitting this mark that we think we're supposed to hit. But what you said was key. And I've heard people say, your job is just to kind of live the faith and lead people to the cross and then get out of the way. Like you're not necessarily responsible always, right, for watering that seed that you plant, or for being responsible for the result. Like you're not always responsible for the result as a leader. Like your job is to present really good options for your team and create a vision and a direction that honors Christ, that honors values and principles that you stand by. And then, let us walk in this together. And it's not our job to drag people to that end point, right? So when we talk about quantifying our Christian influence, sometimes we overinflate that number or what that looks like. And I think you said it pretty well, because overthinking stuff gets us into trouble. But if we just do some of the simple things, I think God takes care of the rest. And that's what I think I'm hearing you say. So, do you have any cool story, like from your job, your days with the youth programs, or even in the military or whatever, you have any cool story maybe of where you did kind of have that impact from a faith standpoint that I don't know if it surprised you in that moment, or you got home at the end of the day, because we kind of take inventory, right, of our day. Do you ever have a story where you look back and go, wow, I did do that right? That was pretty cool. I did take advantage of that moment.
So this story kind of be maybe a little bit different than maybe what you're expecting. But when I was in Iraq, I remember at the time, I was the most money ever made in my entire life. I was making a whole bunch of money because I had no bills to pay, because when you're in Iraq, they cover all your bills. You don't got to pay for nothing. So I'm getting all these extra payments because I'm in the military. And at the time I'm just like, man, look at all this money I have, more than I've ever had in my life at that point. I was so much, I didn't even know what to do with it all. You know what I mean? And I was like, man, this is great. And I remember looking at my bank statement that I had, and I was counting the money, and I was looking at it, and then immediately I became miserable. And the reason why I became miserable is because I had all that money and I had no one to share it with. I had all that money, but I lost my family in the process. You know what I mean? At the time I was married, I went through a divorce. My child didn't even know who I was. I was gone for a year at that time. And I was like, man, I wasn't saved at the time. But I feel like God was he was trying to work on me. He was working on me. He was trying to get my attention, because I thought money was going to give me happiness. And I had the money, but I had no happiness. I had no peace. I had no joy. Yeah. I had, money kind of became my God. And when that God let me down, I said, man, there's got to be a different God that's going to fulfill me, because money ain't it. And so I decided from that day forward, I'm not going to do things for the money no more. And I was doing it for the money. And, I got out of the military, got back home, and got involved in my daughter's life, and been raising her ever since. You know what I mean? And I think if I didn't have that realization with the money, I'd still be chasing money. You know what I mean? Thinking that was going to bring me fulfillment, and even when we're not saved, God's trying to get our attention. And that's what he did for me. I was the furthest thing from saved at that point in my life. And he was still tugging on my heart, like trying to get my attention. Let me show you what matters. At that time in my life, it was, family, people that you love, people that I put into your life. You've ignored them. You've neglected them. You haven't been there for them. And you've been chasing this dollar, and it's left you empty. You had a full pockets with an empty heart, and that's not what God wants.
No, that's a good example because it kind of shifted your perspective. And I think that's exactly what, leadership's about perspective a lot of times and what we value and what we cast as a vision for our team. But it starts kind of internally about what we stand on. And it sounds like to me, you had to shift what you were standing on and and then your faith kind of followed and you realized the void that was there. And sometimes as Christians, we ignore the void that's there. We feel that void and we're like, I don't know what that is. But, sometimes we got to really lean into that and address it and be like, why do I feel empty in this pocket of my life? Like, so if we do some self-assessment, I think God shows it to us and God showed you that. And then you were smart enough to be obedient. And we may not always be smart enough to be obedient in that moment. It may take some time because we're stubborn, we're human. But, at least, you shifted your focus and perspective and went in that direction. And so, I would ask you kind of as we close up, we talk about evaluation and, you wrote a book about living your dash. What is the footprint of your leadership that's going to be there after you? So what are you leaving as kind of that main thing? We talk about the dash, right? And I certainly don't think you can maybe sum it up in one word, but if you can, great. But tell us what we look back on Jesse Cruz's leadership with the youth, with his family, whoever. What's that going to be described as?
I hope it's described as vulnerability, because what I've learned throughout my life is the times where I've been the most real with people, the most honest with people, are the times that have formed the most honest and real relationships.
Mm-hmm.
When people ask me, how's your day going? Oh, it's going good. There's no depth to that. People say, how's your day going? My day actually sucks right now. I've had a terrible day. There's actually something there now. Now we actually have a relationship being established because we're establishing truth and honesty and vulnerability. And you'd be surprised when you share your pain with people, the bond that it develops with others. If you pretend that you're perfect and that there's nothing wrong and life is always good, yeah, you may be admired and you may be respected by people because, oh, look at how great his life is. But there's something deeper when you're able to share the truth and realness that is not on camera, that doesn't get posted on social media. When you can share that, that's what people are looking for. That's what people truly admire. And so I would like to just say that, hopefully that people can become more real and more honest and just when my time is done, I've been able to share the worst day of my entire life with everybody I know. And I think once you're able to share the worst thing that's ever happened to you, then you become empowered. People think it will disempower you, make you weak. It actually does the opposite. When you're openly able to share the worst day of my life, then you have more strength than you'll ever know.
Yep. Because, we as people set walls up. We put walls up all the time, and then that breaks down walls. What you're saying, vulnerability, transparency breaks down those walls, and then people start to trust, which is another thing you talked about today. So tell us where we can find your book. Tell us where we can find anything about you and kind of what your next project looks like without sort of giving it away.
So people can find me on Facebook, or they find me on Instagram, author Jesse Cruz on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn. My email is authorjessecruz@gmail.com. Any of those ways you can get a hold of me. The book is also on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, or people who like to order from me directly can message me on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. And my second book is under, it's in the works. It should be done in the next few months. And And I'll just share it. It's more of it's written in a different style. It's to share that vulnerable thing that we kind of just talked about. It's the journey of my daughter in the hospital and what we experienced in there. So I'm going to just give a day by day moment experience of what we went through and then just share that with the world.
Wow. No, that's really cool, man. I appreciate you today. I think you let people look into who you are. I think you showed us a little bit of your heart today, and that's really admirable, commendable, and appreciated, because I love genuine. I love transparent and authentic. This is what you get with me. So I think the listeners can take away something. We talk about kingdom business. We talked about setting the tone wherever you are, whatever environment you're in. It's going to be, it's not an easy road. So we talked about tempo, obstacles, non-negotiables, and evaluation. So really and truly, you know, if you're listening to this, take those notes down and really look at yourself and see what adjustments you can make. And, you know, take them to God, lay them before Him. I know He's going to empower you to get over some of this stuff and to walk through some of this stuff and to really show you and give you that wisdom to be a better version of the leader you want to be. So, Jesse, thank you for taking time on a Saturday morning, a crisp Saturday morning. We appreciate, we all benefited from your story. And listeners, I hope you got something like I did out of this. And so great way to start out November with Kingdom Business. So with that, I wish you well and be blessed.